We're live. A minute or so late. My apologies for that. I was having a little watching my battery run down, and I thought, oh no, I got to plug that in before we get started so that we don't just fall off the face of the planet while we're talking here. So, recording from a different location this evening, or live streaming from a different location this evening. Hello and welcome to This Day in History for November 7th. November 7th is the 311th day of the year in the Gregorian calendar, 312th in leap years, with 54 days remaining to the end of the year. This day marks the approximate midpoint of autumn in the Northern Hemisphere and spring in the Southern Hemisphere, starting the season at the September equinox. Today's word is male. Male is a noun, and as a word, it has more than one meaning. Meaning, M-E-A-N-I-N-G, meaning. I think all of the meanings consist of nouns, and of course, the first thing most people think of is letters and packages conveyed by a postal system, something that's been on many people's minds over the last few months for various reasons. The other mail is a type of armor consisting of metal rings linked together in a pattern to form.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
I wasn't talking to you. That's so creepy. All right, go back to sleep, honey. We'll put her on. We'll put her on that movie thing so she'll just be dark and quiet. These conveniences. Now, by the way, you're right in my lap, and that's why it's so wiggly. So we'll get back onto the word of the day, male. We spoke of one of the definitions. The other, male, is a type of armor consisting of metal rings linked together in a pattern to form a mesh that was surprisingly effective at deflecting most types of projectiles that were in use when chain mail was commonly used. I will take a moment here to mention that links to my research are included in the show notes. Ask you to go ahead and click that like button. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share this video with others. You can do that with the link in your email, messaging, or social media. And let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I do have comments turned off for the lives because it's too distracting. It's too distracting, and so they're off for the lives, but once it posts, you can comment there. What else can I tell you? Oh, yes, the Day in History playlist. There's a copy in the show notes. I'll put a copy, I think it goes in that corner, and then there'll be a card at the end with a link to the Day in History playlist. And with that, we're going to start with the Sixth Ecumenical Council, which commenced in Constantinople on November 7th in the year 680. They met to settle some theological, I'm going to say controversies. I guess they felt they were controversies, issues. They met to settle some theological issues. For one, they condemned monoenergism and monothelitism. These were beliefs that held that doctrine of one will. And what that meant was that the people who believed in monoenergism or monothelitism believed that Christ had monothelitism is the doctrine of one will. And in this context, it means that Christ had two natures, but one will. I get that mixed up. It's kind of complex. So at the Sixth Ecumenical Council, they decided that monoenergism and monotheism were heretical notions and decided that Jesus had two energies and two wills, those being divine and human. Not sure how I feel about all that, but I don't have to worry about it. The Sixth Ecumenical Council, that's what they were all about. On November 7th in the year 921, kings Charles III of France and Henry I of Germany signed an amicitia, Amicitia, or Pact of Friendship, mutually agreeing upon the border between their kingdoms. Interestingly, a couple years later, Henry made a friendship pact with Robert against Charles, and Robert overtook Charles's kingdom. I don't think it had anything to do with the border, though. The London Gazette, the oldest surviving journal, was first published on November 7, 1665. This is a paper in which statutory notices were required to be published, more like a legal notices type of paper, not a conventional general news coverage type of paper. This is the birthday of Polish chemist and physicist Marie Curie, born November 7, 1867. Now, I encourage you to go find my Day in History playlist after you finish watching this video and find that episode for November 7, 2019. I go into greater depth about Dr. Curie, her life, her work. Fascinating woman. Her studies and discoveries have benefited all of us in some way or another. She lived to the age of 66. A cartoon published on November 7, 1874 by Thomas Nast in Harper's Weekly is considered the first important use of an elephant as a symbol for the United States Republican Party. This is the birthday of the Russian theorist, politician, and founder of the Red Army, Leon Trotsky, born November 7, 1879. He lived to the age of 60. The Canadian Pacific Railway was officially completed on November 7, 1885, with a ceremony driving the final spike. Woodrow Wilson was reelected as President of the United States on November 6, 1916. November 7, 1918 is the birthday of American minister and author Billy Graham. Considered one of the most influential Christian leaders of the 20th century, he lived to the age of 99. On November 7, 1918, the 1918 influenza epidemic spread to Western Samoa, killing about 20% of the population there by the end of the year. That's quite something. We're already in November and it killed 20% of the population by the end of the year. Yikes. This is the birthday of American trumpet player and band leader Al Hirt. Born November 7th, 1922, he lived to the age of 76. The Museum of Modern Art opened to the public on November 7th, 1929. Fiorello LaGuardia was elected 99th mayor of New York City on November 7th, 1933. The original Tacoma Narrows Bridge in Tacoma, Washington collapsed in a windstorm on November 7th, 1940. Just 4 months after it was completed. This is the birthday of singer-songwriter Johnny Rivers, born November 7th, 1942. He had a lot of hits, but the one running in my head right now is Secret Agent Man. Still alive, Johnny Rivers turned 78 in 2020. Also the birthday of music great Joni Mitchell, born November 7th, 1943. And again, see last year's episode of This Day in History for more information about Joni Mitchell. I think she's got a pretty inspiring story with some funny parts. Ms. Mitchell turned 77 in 2020. Franklin D. Roosevelt was reelected to a record fourth term on November 7th, 1944. On November 7th, 1949, the first oil was taken off the first offshore oil platform in the world. Interestingly, this rig is located in the Caspian Sea in Azerbaijan. Armistice Day became Veterans Day on November 7th, 1954. President Lyndon Johnson signed the Public Broadcasting Act of 1967 on November 7th, 1967, establishing the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Richard Nixon was reelected president on November 7th, 1972. On November 7th, 1991, basketball player Magic Johnson announced that he was HIV positive and retired from the NBA. The student radio station at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, WXYC, provided the world's first internet radio broadcast on November 7th. NASA launched the Mars Global Surveyor on November 7th, 1996. And interesting, November 7th in the year 2000 was the controversial U.S. presidential election that had to be resolved in court, Bush versus Gore. It took a bit, but ultimately George W. Bush, affectionately known as W or Dub, won that one, but not quite on this day, becoming the 43rd president of the United States. And oh my goodness, I didn't remember having seen this before. On November 7th, 2000, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration discovered one of the country's largest LSD labs inside a converted military missile silo in Kansas. And that's all I have for you today. I hope you learned something you didn't know before. I know I sure did, always do. Again, links to my research are included in the show notes, along with the This Day in History playlist. I'll link the playlist in the corner, and then there'll be a card right at the end of the video once it renders, and I can attach those things to it. And I guess that's it. Thanks. And the crowd goes wild. I mean, when I go live, I go live. I actually have a live audience in-house tonight. Thank you. And this is where I look for the thank you very much button and click that. And then the are you sure button. Come back tomorrow, we'll do it again.